Welcome back to Behind Enemy Lines, and my guest today is Kyle Phoenix from Baltimore Beatdown, who covers the Ravens. First off, Kyle, how you doing?
Doing great, Joseph. How are you?
I'm good, man. After one loss here, it kind of feels like the sky's falling a little bit in this fan base. Obviously a big game today coming up against the Ravens, the 0-2 Ravens. So I guess that's kind of where I wanted to start, Kyle. If the sky is falling over here, how's it feel in Baltimore?
Yeah, the fans feel like this is utter despair right now. They lost a game that truly on their schedule they should have won, especially with the schedule that's going on right now. After facing the Chiefs, they're going to have to go against the Bills. They're facing a Cowboys team that's very talented, and then the Bengals after that as well. So right now there's a lot of frustration from the fan base that they're 0-2. And this was a team with sky-high expectations, Super Bowl aspirations. They added Derrick Henry thinking that was going to be, the piece to get them over the top. And right now fans are concerned that this is all coming apart before it ever really got going.
Yeah, one thing that Mike McCarthy always talks about is uncommon opponents, and that's teams that aren't usually on the schedule. Ravens Chiefs happens a lot, and obviously the Ravens played very well despite losing that game. Ravens Raiders, not a common opponent. Raiders Cowboys, not a common opponent. I guess part of me wonders, Kyle, do you think maybe that there was a lot of scouting emphasis on the Chiefs, and now we're kind of picking up the pieces a little bit as they try to figure out an identity? Or how do you think that they are prepared for an uncommon opponent in the Dallas Cowboys?
I think that's a big part of it because for the last 9 months, all of the discussion, all of the topics surrounding Baltimore was about the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost to them in the AFC Championship. So for months on end, it was discussions about them, and then then the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. So of course that continues the conversation. The schedule gets released, and the Ravens' first opponent, the Kansas City Chiefs. So the build-up all off season was not only just about that AFC Championship because it was that opponent, but then they were scheduled to play them week 1. So that was a lot of the build-up. I don't necessarily think the Ravens ignored their preparation against the Raiders. The Ravens tend to do a really good job preparing for each week's opponents. John Harbaugh has a history of being able to put games ahead and aside and being able to focus on the next week and structure things for them. But ultimately, I think something got led astray in there and communication breakdown, some miscues, some lack of discipline in other areas resulted in a demoralizing loss to the Raiders on their opening weekend.
Yeah, so let's dive into the actual matchup a little bit here. It's so funny because I think oftentimes we talk about X factors and we talk about, this good guy against this talented player. I think one of the X factors in this game, Kyle, is the Cowboys' interior defensive line, which, spoiler alert, has not been very good, actually quite bad. And the Ravens' interior offensive line, Tyler Linderbaum is a stud. We know that. The guard situation, though, a little bit more precarious. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on there and how that might match up against the Cowboys' interior defensive line that has not been good?
Right. The left guard position has been steadily held by Andrew Voorhees, who the Ravens drafted a season prior. He redshirted because he tore his ACL during the scouting combine the season before, and many were expected to see him immediately kind of be a plug and play guy. Maybe not a top tier player, but he's been in the classroom, he's been in the meetings, he was living in the weight room according to multiple coaches and teammates of his. So he was expected to be game ready, and it hasn't really translated all that well. You can see the potential there, but it just hasn't become production. At right guard, there's been an experiment all off season with Daniel Fa'alele at right guard. He is a 380-pound, 6'8" tackle. He's been a career tackle since high school, in college at Minnesota, and then he was even playing right tackle last season. He was on a rotation with Morgan Moses in the prior season, even in the playoff game against the Houston Texans in the first round. So many expected him to kind of continue that, but instead he's been playing right guard. He hasn't demonstrated the speed. He hasn't demonstrated the protection ability or even kind of the mauling ability you would hope to see from a player that's the biggest guard in the NFL. And one of the biggest guys, he was, I believe, the biggest player to ever kind of be out of the draft because he was just such a massive framed player with so much potential. But the speed at the interior is something that he's struggled with. I talked to him about it during training camp and how it's a challenge to get out of his stance and how he's learning a lot, but it's just a lot to take on. And ultimately it's been a very crucial weak point of theirs through 2 weeks where Chris Jones in week one was pointing out guys along the offensive line that he was just going to go one-on-one with and beat. He was pointing out Fa'alele at times. And then in week two, fourth quarter, Max Crosby on a stunt splits through the inside at the right guard after he swipes from outside on the right tackle back inward. And Fa'alele can't pick him up. He doesn't see him. He doesn't react fast enough. And that's been a struggle there. Right tackle's been intriguing because it's also been a rotation with veteran right tackle and just super sub sixth man Patrick McCary, who has played all 5 spots on the Ravens offensive line in his career and has been successful in doing so, which is impressive. They're rotating him with rookie second round draft pick Roger Rosengarten, and there's been some success from both of them. Overall, it's just been a lot of buildup since the Ravens parted ways with 3 of their starters from the prior season, and it hasn't been fruitful thus far.
I know Rosengarten was a guy that Cowboys fans were kind of intrigued by if they didn't get a tackle in the first round. They obviously got Tyler Guyton. But when you were talking about Fa'alele, one thing I kept thinking was the Cowboys last week, Mike McCarthy said on defense, we're not quicker to the punch. And I think maybe going up against a guy who's a little bit slower, that might be something that helps. But also he probably carries a big punch with that kind of size and demeanor. Let's move on a little bit. Another offensive lineman, Ronnie Stanley. It looked like he missed practice this week, so did at one practice this week. So did Kyle Hamilton, Nate Wiggins, Kyle Van Noy, who had an orbital fracture. What can you tell me about just kind of the health of those guys and whether or not they'd be ready to play on Sunday or today against the Cowboys?
Yeah, all things are positive. Fortunately for the Ravens, Ronnie Stanley returned to practice after missing just one. Same goes with every single other player. The only thing that was of any real concern by Friday's practice was that David Ojabo popped up on the injury report on Thursday with a quad injury, but he's not even their starting outside linebacker. That's Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe. So today I don't really worry about whether or not Ojabo is going to be a part of the big picture. Nate Wiggins is the one that we're really going to see what happens because the Ravens want him to play. They feel he's ready to. On Friday, Harbaugh said that he participated fully. He just wore the red no contact jersey, the penny over the top, because he was still going through the final stages of concussion protocol in the NFL. So that's going to be really what is the deciding factor on whether or not doctors clear him to play.
Another guy that, people don't really worry about is Justin Tucker. Obviously, potential future Hall of Fame career here. He's been fantastic. But when it comes to 50-plus yard field goals, the NFL has never had better kicking from 50-plus. And meanwhile, Justin Tucker has been struggling from 50-plus. He's 1 of 7 since the start of last season. But he's automatic from 49 in, I guess. What do you make of the Justin Tucker 50-plus kind of conundrum they got going on over there?
It's been strange. I study kicking. I love covering special teams. I do actually a yearly annual breakdown of kickers, and that, career accuracy isn't the full story of success of kickers. And Tucker has always been the top of that list in just about every single metric. And it hasn't been the case this past season. And it started off equally rough. He's 0 for 2 from 50 plus. So it's been a challenge. It's uncertain as to what the issue is. Tucker, was forthright in saying this isn't my favorite thing to talk about, of course, when he was asked about it. But he did say he's really focused on just the next kick and fixing whatever it is that's the case. And each one of them have been different in certain regards, whether it's weather, the hold, the snap, just him not being able to put the proper contact on it or the accuracy. The thing that is the case is he's had the leg on all of them. It's the fact that it's gone wide or it's just been shy of getting inside the upright that's really been the issue there. So, and I believe only one of them was blocked. So it's not like there's been huge protection breakdowns that are kind of forcing this issue. So overall, it's just been a strange case of he hasn't had the scope zeroed in to what we've always expected of him since he started his reign as the best kicker and most accurate in NFL history.
Ironically, Brandon Aubrey has never missed from 50-plus. He's 13 for 13, and so that makes me wonder if the Cowboys have an advantage there. One place they do not have an advantage, Kyle, is in the running game. It's a running back by committee for Dallas, that a committee that hasn't been exploited enough, hasn't been shown enough. Meanwhile, the Ravens kind of have King Henry and this guy named Lamar Jackson who can tote the rock pretty darn well. With this combination, this thunder and lightning, has it gone off on full steam yet? Or is the Ravens still kind of trying to figure out what the actual identity and the fluidity of just having, Lamar Jackson and then Derrick Henry and a guy like Pat Ricard potentially leading the way for him?
That has been kind of the topic of discussion over the past week leading up to this game, was just what is their offensive identity? It hasn't been fully demonstrated or just realized, and they're still searching for it. Over the first 2 weeks, Justice Hill has actually outsnapped Derrick Henry, and I think a big part of that is just they get behind the sticks, they get behind the yardage, they're in a lot of 2-minute over the past 2 weeks. And so what happens is they have a receiving back option that's a bit more trustworthy in Justice Hill. He's excellent in pass protection. I mean, on the final 2 snaps against the Chiefs in week 1, there's highlights all over of Justice Hill going one-on-one with Chris Jones and holding his own, and it was rather impressive. So I think that's something that they're still searching for. The offensive line issues have been a great factor in that. In the first half against the Raiders, Derrick Henry finished with 5 yards. It was on 7 carries. So he did finish with, I believe, 84 yards, and they started to realize what they can really use with him. They've had flashes of the potential of Derrick Henry in this offense and Lamar Jackson. We saw it in the first drive against the Chiefs. We saw it in the second half against the Raiders. It's more about putting together that operation for 60 minutes, and each time they have the ball to really have that opportunity. And this is the opportunity to solve it against a team that has struggled against defending the run, and be able to put together game plans and also test where they can be most successful and where they can grow. And that's, I think, going to be a part of the mission for the Ravens today.
The Ravens run multiple tight end sets more than anyone in the league. And they have some good guys that can do it. Even Isaiah Likely, obviously, he looks like an up-and-coming star. Mark Andrews has been a star. And even Charlie Kolar can play, too. With that kind of versatility, with those guys who can not only catch the ball, but also kind of help out in the run game, how difficult of a mismatch can that make for an opposing defense?
I think that's been one of the greatest factors in the Ravens' advantage this season, is just so much attention is being paid to Mark Andrews. He's known as Lamar Jackson's favorite target. There's a good reason why. He's highly successful. He's good as a receiver, as a route runner, as a guy that can make plays after the catch. And so the Chiefs blanketed him more than any other team has in double coverage since 2021. So the Chiefs blanketed him, and what did that allow for? Isaiah Likely to go off for more than 100 yards, have a big play, score a touchdown. He helped lead the Ravens and nearly scored a second one that would have, put them within an opportunity to win that game, if not for his toe being on the back end line. So the Ravens really have a talented tight end room. I believe Isaiah Likely would start on a whole host of other rosters, but he's sitting behind All-Pro Mark Andrews, which is to the Ravens' benefit. They need to figure out how to amplify both of them when they're on the field. That was a big struggle last season, was when it was just Mark Andrews on the field, he was successful. When Isaiah Likely was just on the field when Mark Andrews suffered injury, he lit the field aflame. But unfortunately, when both of them have been on the field, they've kind of struggled. But this season, they've showed that they are capable of making both of them successful. It's just about amplifying that to a higher level and being able to score, being able to move the chains when the tight ends are Lamar's favorite targets, especially on third downs, to be able to make tough possession catches. They have opportunity, especially against the Cowboys defense, to make something happen.
Yeah, Likely was a guy that I really stuck out to me at Coastal Carolina that year when they were kind of going on a run there, and it's good to see him, kind of getting that shine now with Baltimore. All right, Kyle. In a couple hours, we've got 0-2 Ravens, 1-1 Cowboys, 2 teams with Super Bowl aspirations. It feels like a must-win for both teams, even early on in this season. Tell me what your prediction is. Do we got an 0-3 Baltimore leaving Dallas, or 1-2 Cowboys? What are you expecting from this game, and what is your X factor ultimately for this game?
The thing that I've said is the Ravens, where the Cowboys are strong, the Ravens are weak. Cowboys have talent and an elite pass rusher. The Ravens have struggled through 2 weeks at defending that elite pass rusher. They've struggled to defend elite wide receivers. Devontae Adams had an incredible second half against them. they're playing CeeDee Lamb, and a quarterback that can sling it, was the MVP runner-up last season to Lamar. So this is an area that they're dangerous. They have a kicker that just might be better than Tucker right now as well. So that usual X factor with the Ravens there. I know that's all strange for me to praise nothing but the Cowboys, but I am picking the Ravens in this because I've said it all week. This just feels like that game that they put it together and then give the Ravens fans hope and eliminate that incredible pressure that's been mounting on them. The Ravens are highly successful in the Lamar Jackson era of playing NFC teams. I believe he has a 20-1 record. It was just against the Giants a season or two ago. That was the lone blemish on that record. I think that's just the only. I hate to do the vibes and the feels over the data and the numbers, but it's just such a Ravens kind of thing to be down in the dumps. Things are not looking good, and they pull out a 60-minute production and they execute effectively, and they go in and they take care of business on the road after a struggling couple of games, including one that they should have won last week.
Kyle, I think you've done the impossible. With that stat you mentioned, you have Cowboy fans wanting to emulate the Giants. And I think that that's something that's never been done in the history of the NFL. So thank you for breaking ground on that. And thank you for coming on today. His name's Kyle Phoenix. He's at Baltimore Beatdown. Kyle, thank you so much and enjoy the game today.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful rest of it. Can't wait for the rest of the show.
We all silly like the mayor.